Future career naval officers are expected to occupy management and command positions within the operational units of the French Navy. Combat ships, submarines, naval aviation flotillas, naval commandos. During their training at the Naval Academy, they develop the skills that will make them future leaders of the Navy. The constant evolution of the resources of the Navy and the world requires training and developing the human, military, and morale qualities of students and ensuring that they receive training that meets current and future strategic challenges. The Naval School's motto is "For France by sea we fight." For France by sea we fight. That comes from the Ministry of the Armed Forces page on the École Naval, the French Naval School. And no, this is not another video about the École. This is not. I've done one. That was enough for me. Frankly, I don't wish to do another because that is a period of history which I like to try and ignore. It has long-term repercussions for everyone, but honestly, I do try and ignore it. The fact that media types managed to publish so much and persuade so much of the opinion that everyone was taking their view over people who actually had studied it. Even the journalists' opinions have been taken over the opinions of the historians and the opinions of the professional naval officers, unless they agreed with the journalists' opinions. The École is weird, okay? The École is weird. But leaving that to one side, École Naval, the French Naval Academy. Now, this is one of those places which has a very interesting history. It has a very, very interesting history. It's been going for quite a while. And when I say quite a while, it was established in 1830. That's 195 years ago. And it is, to an extent, a mixture of naval college, university, and engineering school. And it is a very successful part of the French Navy. I have to admit, since it's established, it's been doing pretty darn well and has really helped them pull things forward. And there is no surprise to me that after dealing with the joys of the Napoleonic Wars and the Revolutionary Wars and all the issues they'd had since Louis XIV's purge of the Huguenots, they realized they needed to do something. They needed to do something to build their navy back better. Try and create some sort of methodology of maintaining institutional memory. And this is one of the interesting things which comes up a lot in modern armed forces and modern debates. We're talking about why do people do staff rides, which are those trips when they take a load of officers and NCOs and they take them to visit old previous battles, etc. Usually done by land forces. It's far more difficult to do for naval forces, etc. And why do they encourage reading history books? And, well, this is always leads to a debate. There is always the policy of, no, they should be adapting to new systems. No, they need to be immersed in new conflict. And the thing is, they do. But the thing is, as the French will tell you, because they went through the largest loss of institutional memory of any navy in history, barring perhaps the Russian Navy. And they suffered for it. There is a reason why going into the 18th century, the French Navy are pretty darn good and everyone's fairly respectful of them. By the beginning of the 19th century, everyone's looking at them going, ha, ha, ha. They have great ships. They have great elan. They don't have doctrine or command worth a DAMN. They don't. Why? Because they've had so much institutional memory taken out of them. And there are three ways you can pass on institutional memory. One, you can keep a force at a fairly large size and you can keep having the people going through and you can pass on the institutional memory by osmosis. That's great, as long as the force is doing the same things as an ongoing capability. And so it can pass on memory. Two, If you're going to be shifting tasks, but you want to retain the institutional memory of those previous tasks, then you have to keep small units, small sections of your force, very much focused on the previous tasks to maintain the memory within those small groups. And then you have to be able to develop a system that you can rapidly expand that memory out to the wider force structure when you need to. Usually they write things like memorandums and various systems and guides for operations. And third option is you employ a load of historians and you teach them history. And you encourage your own officers to read history books, read books about what previous people have done, books written by historians, books written by his previous officers, etc., of their previous events, and to extent live vicariously through them. Now, the thing is, if you're not doing option 1, which is the best way to maintain institutional memory, then if you rely on either just option 2 or just option 3, you are royally going to muck it up at some point. At some point, you're not going to have enough historians producing enough information, enough people reading them, for you to do it. Especially if you have a force which is always attracted to being technically minded. And by that I mean they are naturally more keen to read engineering, mathematics, science than necessarily history. And that's nothing wrong with that. Please note, this is not me. The amount of times I read humanities versus STEM arguments, I just find it so annoying. You need both. I teach both. I've taught history of engineering to engineers. I have taught introduction to engineering to humanities. I have taught both. They both need both. Deal with it. That's it, okay? And trust me, the people who need it most are the people who are going to be moving around in physical and human geography and dealing with a lot of science and engineering. They need everything. They need all the chances they can get to actually be able to deal with the situations that are going to be chucked to them. But we'll leave that to one side. The point is, there are many excuses in life as to why you don't have a 20-year-old body. Mine is I'm nearer to 40 than I am 20. There are no excuses in life why someone who's going into an operation hasn't got a 10,000-year-old mind. And I mean that at every level. The thing I like about the French Naval School and the French Navy in particular is they encourage the reading of history, the study of previous operations, etc. at all levels. They encourage it. The French are an interesting navy, but they have learnt to deal with and have in some ways institutionalized their methodology of dealing with their loss of institutional memory. And then you had the École, which I don't want to keep talking about, but then led to institutional memory and infrastructure memory loss in terms of their construction side, which took many years to get over. They have gone through this twice. Both times have been as much self-inflicted as they have been inflicted by other people on them. And this explains to me why the French Navy is the Navy it is today. And I would argue the Navy which has studied most what's happened to the French Navy was the Italian Navy. And that's the reason why the Italian Navy is as successful as it is today. Because it's taken on board some of those lessons. Because for quite a while, their two threats that they were building up when they were being formed and when they were being created was the French Navy and the Austro-Hungarian Navy. And you study your threats. And you learn from them. The case is simple. The French Naval School since 1830, and it's not that long way from Dartmouth. It really isn't. I thought I'll put that up there just as a bit of a... You can literally ferry journey, it's under 9 hours travel between the two, by car, on a ferry. It's a nice place. But it used to not be this many buildings. Like pretty much every naval college, it didn't start out with buildings, and when it has a ship of the line there, that does rather fit them. It does rather fit them, because for many years, They were ships of the line. They were ships of the line. Now the thing is, before these age of sail ships, even before the École Naval was established, the French have a long history of using schools, of turning to schools as a solution for institutional memory, for training officers. They'd sent off a lot of people to train under the Order of St. John, i.e. the Knights Hospitallers. And then in the 17th century onwards, the companies of the Guard of the Navy and the Flag, or the Garde Marine, is Garde de la Marine, was based in ports of Brest, Rochefort, and Toulon, and they did a lot of training on naval officers. There had been a first naval school established under Louis XV because of the work of his predecessor Louis XIV of the Royal School of the Navy of Le Havre, and yeah. But the trouble is that was closed by Louis XVI in 1775 to save money, and then recommissioned as the companies of the Guards of the Navy. Again, back to the Guards of the Navy and the Flag. And then special naval schools have been created under the First Empire. And then in 1816, the Royal College of the Navy succeeded them, and then in 1818, it was reworked, and that worked that way until the end of the Restoration in 1830, and then the school was established in Brest. And the first training ship was the Orion, which, how do I put this, became the naval school. And that was what established it, the first school. And the school would remain afloat until 1914 in pretty much, mostly in ships of the line. Mostly in ships of the line. It's capable these days of doing 1,500 students per year on all courses, which is pretty decent. And the thing is, they did find they needed to go through ships of the line rather regularly. There are probably two reasons for this. One, there's the quality of the water they found themselves positioned in. Dartmouth is quite good for preserving ships' hulls. Where the French positioned this school, which is near a place called Lanvuc, the Pulmuc Cove, it is not so good. They are far more likely to get more quickly growth of various things which cause damage to your hulls. Barnacles and other lovely stuff. It's always eating away. Everything is always trying to eat your hull. This is the first. There are people who turn around to me and tell me wooden hulls last forever. They don't. There's things always trying to eat them and destroy them. You're in a never-ending battle of protection. It's kind of like your battle with your own mortality. You can stave it off as much as you can. You can work hard to keep it going for as long as you want. But eventually, you lose. But they have a good collection of ships, and it's useful as it carries on. It trains up and allows them to try and recapture some of the knowledge. This is one of the reasons why, when we're talking about the French Navy, at certain points we have to be very careful what we're talking about, because there's a quality of training they're giving officers versus what comes out sometimes in certain scenarios. One of the problems the French Navy runs into continually is a similar issue the Americans run into, but their reaction to their officers is kind of different, in that for quite a long time the French had a rule that pretty much you got to a certain rank, Vice Admiral, which was their equivalent of 2-star, Contre-Admiral, Vice Admiral. See the videos on ranks that have come out on this channel and for more details. And that meant that whilst they would have a brevet rank of Admiral and Commander-in-Chief of the Navy, or maybe Vice Admiral d'Escadre, which is basically their equivalent of 3-star, Squadron Vice Admiral, when they were at important functions and there was, let's say, a Royal Navy Vice Admiral, or let be on a full Admiral, they ranked well below them. Even if they didn't, even if they were officially been in position first, because the Royal Navy rank were permanent ranks. They were ranks you'd been promoted to, not that you were acting in and would be confirmed in upon retirement, if they're being nice. It's a constant issue. Now, the thing is, all of these ships tend to get renamed Bordas. They tend to become Bordas. First of all, I mentioned was the Orion, then there's the Commerce de Paris. And the Commerce de Paris is the first that's renamed Borda after Jean-Charles de Borda, a French scientist and marine engineer. Yeah, the French have... It's a sort of name which sounds like it should be really good for a naval school. We're naming him after a marine scientist and a scientist and marine engineer. Realistically, it kind of says we are focusing on mathematics, being a physicist, being a navigator, all these things. Yes, but they're here to learn to be a naval school. And the trouble is, your options in terms of great admirals of France are not that limited, but well, there's de Cassine, there's Tourville. To an extent, you could go d'Estrées. Colbert, the minister, would be a good one. He's pretty much the father of the French Navy. There's de Colny, even if you wanted to go right down the Huguenot line, but probably a bit on the nose. There are so many good options for some great admirals to go from that. Realistically, it's kind of sad that they didn't. Now I can understand why. Sometimes it's easier, and if you look at some of the French history and some of the issues they've had, you can understand why. Some there are, there is always political problems going on. There's always issues. There's the fact that some of their best admirals were Huguenots, which caused issues. Caused issues when they were pushed out. Caused issues internally while they were around. It's a lot of complication, but still, it seems a shame to me. It seems a shame. But that is the way it is. That is the way it is. And it was then the Valmy, and then the Intrepid, which became the third border. I mean, 4 ships of the line. There's been 3 border, and then the last border was replaced with the Duguay-Trouin, which became the 4th border. Yes, the Duguay-Trouin, which was named for an admiral itself. So, yeah, it's the way life goes sometimes. And it was in this period when they had this vessel that they started really pushing for what new recruits were going to go through. Some of the traditions at the time were not particularly great. I'd say the fact that on the first day mass you'd all have had your head shaved. The older students would be chanting at your pebble to their shaved heads while they're having a mass in front of their parents I don't think it's a particularly good methodology of induction. Neither is denying them dinner, but that's what they did in those times. There are all sorts of interesting things that go on. There's also the fact that they didn't really have to go without dinner. There was traditionally they would be given a very light soup, which would then be chucked out by the older students, tell them they have to go without, and then later on, the older students would produce cake and Madeira wine out of their pockets for the newcomers to formalise their adoption as naval officers. So, yeah, I suppose it works out, but there are some traditions you listen to and you go, I like that tradition, I want to keep that. And there are some traditions you listen to and go, I'm not sure that ever worked as an idea. Because the idea is, to an extent with these schools, that they are going to break down your personality. retain the bits which are useful to the naval life and discard the bits which aren't. They're going to let you emerge as a naval officer, as a full adult. However, it's a case of you have to be careful, because that is a process which is delicate. And to an extent, all organizations, all things like this have to do that to the people going through them. They have to. Why? Because you have to have some conformity. You have to, in some ways, give up some of your individualism to conform with the group, to work within the group, to work within the needs of the organization. And that's the way it's been for centuries. And there are some individual warrior castes, etc., and these things, but when you're talking about an organization like a ship, when you're talking about the organization like a modern fighting formation, where there needs to be a high degree of interoperability, where people need to work together, where they need to communicate with each other, they need to understand each other, you need to build a common framework, a common reference. And you don't have the opportunity of having people grow up together to learn that framework, so you have to get them to grow up together again, in a way. And to make it span generations, you have to get them all to grow up together again in a similar way, so it does span the generations, so you build an intergenerational methodology of communicating and understanding each other. And touchstones that they can all relate back to. Oh, do you remember when I was when you were a pebble? Oh, the shaved hair. Oh, that was terrible. That sort of thing. Or when you lost all that food and had no food and thought you were going to have no dinner. Oh, yeah. You do that to build up not just cultural memory and institutional memory of events and knowledge to be passed on, but also a method of communicating that institutional memory by providing touchstone references that people can communicate with and understand each other. And that's what a large amount of this schooling is about, realistically. It's about building those sorts of things. There are various levels of schooling in service. In this period they're still learning to be a sailor, as well as learning to understand engines and all the different sort of navigations, etc. systems they needed to do. But the fact is, you learn first as a junior officer to be a sailor, then you learn to be a junior officer, and then later in your career you're taught to be a senior officer, and later in your career still you're taught to be what I would call a commander. There's a senior officer who runs a ship. There's a junior officer who is leading a sub-department on a ship. And then there is a level at which you're commanding fleets of ships. And the things you need to deal with at those levels, whilst they're not dissimilar, they are different enough they do require a complete retraining. And again, one of the things you come back to a lot when people look at the differences in the requirements of those roles is, why do we pretend that officers who are trained to do one thing can then do the other and the other? And why don't we just train people from the beginning to do them? And the realistic reason is that you need to understand the various levels to properly coordinate it. You do need understanding of the various levels. You need an understanding of what the junior officers are dealing with. You need an understanding of what the senior officers are dealing with before you can command them strategically. But often, the communication works better going up than going down. Because it's like if I'm talking about in an academic world, when you're dealing with some professors and academics who have researched their field to such a level they basically they mentally inhabit that area of history, they can have a hard time sometimes communicating with people who are outside their field if they're trying to explain themselves, because they're so used to talking in a certain shorthand in a certain way. They're so used to expressing themselves in certain phraseologies which make sense in that field and are an understood touchstone in that field, but elsewhere don't have the same context. And so they can sound, that's where a lot of whilst there is a degree of truth within the ivory tower framework, which is often chucked at academia, there is a degree of truth in it. A large measure of it actually comes down to that fact that the people who are most knowledgeable in their fields, usually furthest down the rabbit hole of research, often have trouble communicating with people outside it. And it's the same with pretty much every field. If we look at banking, there are a number of people who understand how the world financial system works, versus the number of people who can both understand how the world financial system works and can communicate it, is very small. The people who can communicate it can talk to investors, can get their money, can explain what they're going to do with their money, and all these things. They're the ones who really make the maximum money, because they are the rarest individuals. It's the same with academia, it's the same with every field. It's the same with every field. The people who can really, really go in depth in their field will understand their field to the nth degree. And it's, with naval officers, again, it's the same. As they go further and further up and as they get different roles, these things can become interesting. Anyway, shameless book plug time. Shameless book plug. Time for me to say thank you for supporting the channel, for liking, sharing, and subscribing, doing everything you do to help the channel grow. Thank you for that. And, well, thank you for making it all possible. Hope you're enjoying the year of leadership. It's now getting up to the fact it's almost over, which is quite disturbing when you consider this is being recorded in, well, beginning of August. It's going out in August. But fast approaching up to the, getting up to the pace of, normal pace of production of videos. Well, closest I've been to it since I had double pneumonia. And you might have noticed that the videos are starting to reach out into the future, as I always record all the videos in order. So it doesn't matter if it's a Thursday topic, I will record it now. It might not go out till Saturday, until a Saturday many, many months in the future, but it'll be recorded now, so I'll know it. And so they're edging out further and further into next year. And yeah, that's part of all the policy of making sure I have things better together. And soon there's going to be a batch of, well, there could probably by the time it's going to be a batch of 3 of the videos, which, you know, the Scuttlebutt series going up, because I've got about 3 of those ready to go, and which I'm going to record just an extra night. So I might do 13 videos that week or 12 videos that week rather than the normal 9 to 10 I'm currently trying to aim for. But it'll be good. It'll be good, and hopefully it also gives some confidence to people when they're looking at the channel, knowing that all the recorded videos are so well so nicely stacked up that they know when they're going to be. They can look up and they can go, oh, that's when that comes out, and that's when that comes out, and I know that's going to come out then, and that's going to come out then, and there's going to be some reliability to it, as they're all set for premieres. Because basically what I do is go into policy, because with the algorithm, when I do a regular video produce, and I do that for the Scuttlebutt series more often than not, and versus the other video, versus a premiere, the amount of circulation and exposure YouTube gives it is dramatically different. Dramatically different. So if I want to grow the channel, if I want to achieve 20,000 subscribers by Christmas so that my mum and aunt's bet is finally over, I need to do everything I can. So please bear with me as I shamelessly do shameless book plugs, shorts, as in short videos, and you know, those vertical uprights things for that go up in your scroll, which actually have proved quite good in reminding people of this channel when they've watched a couple of videos and then haven't watched others for ages, and apparently it's doing quite well at reminding people this channel exists and getting them to come back and watch more videos, which is nice. And that's according to YouTube analytics. And premieres, because I need to do everything I can to try and get that bet over with. But as I was saying before the shameless book plug, ships can't go on forever. They really can't. And eventually you go, you know what, we need an actual frigating building. This is getting expensive. It's getting real expensive. The problem is they did like to do the sailing tradition and the year of campaign. This actually did quite well. They had the Jeanne d'Arc series of ships, which even goes on to a lovely helicopter carrier. Unfortunately, she's decommissioned in 2010, and now they have the Mission Jeanne d'Arc, which usually one of the Mistral class is involved in that. But it's a beautiful thing, and they do a round-the-world voyage, and all voyage around various allies, and it really finishes off their training school and their training experience really rather well. And it's, again, one of the things I'd really like to include in the British system, but Yeah, the British do it in a different way. But I think the whole campaign is a good idea. It's a good way to further build up your esprit de corps. It's a really cool thing. What happened when they decided to move to stone was that, well, after World War One, they had issues. They'd had the plan in 1900s to bring it to land. They'd even chosen location at Le Pont near Brest, but it failed because the government had all the plans, but the government also didn't vote to give it the money. This is a typical French system. Don't worry, it just let's just leave it as French governments being French governments in the 20th century. They are a special form of government. They can both decide to do something and decide not to fund something. They can decide not to do it and still decide to fund it. It is special, okay? All governments are interesting. The French one is special in the 20th century. And finally, in 1929, they actually do manage to lay down a stone. It's laid down by Georges Leguz, who's the Minister of Navy at the point, and it's inaugurated in September 30th, 1935, but the building's inaugurated in 35. The school is inaugurated in May the 30th, 1936, and the President, Albert Lebrun, is there for that. He's also there for it. It's fun because there are so many inaugurations in this that you can get really quite mixed up, and I am literally the end updates I've gone by the newspaper articles. One said inaugurations of the buildings, and one said inauguration of the school, which I think could also be the first time it's taking in students or something. So, but I'm trying to work out through what is basically a blatant political publications of the 1930s of people trying to put out blatant PR. So, to my mind, it's probably that it had multiple inaugurations because it was found every time they did an inauguration of a school, the president looked good. And the fact it's the same president going back a few times adds to that. It's either that or someone has found that sending a certain president off to go do these inaugurations keeps him busy and out the way for a few days. Either way, it has a lot. And it's from this point onwards it really starts to build and spread out. During 1945, there's huge damage done to it. Huge damage, and they are temporarily transferred to the Levenok seaplane base. And then eventually the naval school is rebuilt at this location by order of General de Gaulle, and that's where the modern buildings are. The modern buildings there are the ones built by General de Gaulle at Levenok seaplane base. And Saint-Pierre-Quilavon naval school there now houses what's called the Brest Naval Training Center, which includes their naval high school, their petty officer school, and their school of marines. Pretty good, pretty nice place. Pretty useful place. So these are the old buildings. These are the new buildings, the modern academy. And it's kept some of the things. It's got a bar Buddha. It's got an Orion building, which is in picture here. There's the Intrepid Tower. And the modern academy is really useful, really good. It's got a fair number of courses going on there. The standard course structure is split over 6 semesters, with semester 1 being basic maritime military training, semester 2 being scientific core, semester 3 being scientific options and international relations. That's always kind of a useful one for naval officers. Naval officers will tend to bump into a lot of international relations in their work, and they'll need to understand both the theory and the practice. One of the interesting things I've had discussions over the years with people have been people going, well, why do the officers need to understand this? Surely diplomats understand it. And the answer is, the officers need to understand international relations theory because the diplomats tend to go on about it a lot. And in order to understand what the diplomats are going on about and asking them, they need to understand the same knowledge as the diplomats to an extent. The naval officers involved can rarely expect the diplomats to actually translate for them. You'd think so, but usually the diplomat's first job is to try and translate their diplomacy to their government and into the diplomacy of the other people they're negotiating with. The naval officers who are there, who are assisting them and trying to support out and find out what's going on and where they're going to be part of, usually are presumed to know what they need to know. And this is another thing that comes back to that whole thing at the beginning about what do we train modern officers in. And the answer is, you need to train them in everything because of the different worlds they're going to inhabit over their careers. Semester 4 is Advanced Scientific and Defence Environmental Pathways. Semester 5 is the final project. And Semester 6 is the Application Campaign at Sea, aka Mission Jeanne d'Arc, where they get to put all they want to do into practice at sea. And at the end of this course, they're usually titled the Graduate Engineer of the Naval School, and that's the engineering course. There are various other courses as well available there. They do well. They do well. But it's not just you have to sit there, you have to stand. And to the future, they have a whole set of things going on. They have 8 Leopard class training ships, which are these, honestly, OPV-like vessels. They really are, but they're nicknamed the Menagerie, and Leopard, Cheetah, Jaguar, Lion, Lynx, Panther, Jackal and Tiger are used for various trips to sea to learn the jobs and rules of being a watch leader by putting theory into practice and practice into theory. They have navigation training vessels for higher navigation training, that's Glycine and Eglantine. They have training vessels for manoeuvre, Engagity and Vigilante, which are some various interesting vessels. They have 4 infraline navigation simulators, which you can see, and various other systems as well for training. They do a lot of work to train their officers to as high standards as they can and to give them as much experience as they can, to accelerate their experience of scenarios as much as they can. And that's all good. That's useful. It has a pretty good future, I say. As long as it continues to be funded as well as it has been and continues to be invested in, and I know occasionally it gets forgotten, but as long as it continues to be invested in, I think the École Naval is probably one of the best schools in Europe. It's a really cool school and a really good program. Anyway, I always finish these videos with a question, and I'm not going to change that now. So, the question is this, and it's, as we go through this year, and I've talked more and more about these various schools, how would you design a modern naval training program? What would you want as your modern officer school? How would you work it through? How would you be training the junior officers? And remember, that is what this is about. This is about training junior officers. Lord knows they're going to have it off on their plate. You need to train them to be junior officers first before they can have the burdens of senior officers or even more fun higher command put on them. But how would you do it? What would the school be like? What have we got coming up? Ooh, what's coming after this? Oh, Hugo von Pohl. Oh, that's next week's video. That's going to be a fun one. I should be recording that tomorrow. Thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I hope you enjoyed. And if you like the videos, please do like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel grow. Thank you.